still in northwestern Spain, and today's 189-kilometer route also heading northeast towards the water.
And the water is where everything gets exciting for the guys late in the race, because they have that Category 3 climb of the Mirador del Izarro with ramps as steep as 29%, all in the rearview mirror for them already. It's been up and down all day long. When they get over the top of that climb, then they're into wind exposure, and then they finish out right at the water. So it's a tricky day. It's not a day where he could just relax and sit back.
And now we are live with the race, and Johnny Hogerland, the Dutch national road champion, riding for Vakant Soleil and riding back at the medical car, getting some treatment to his knee.
And this looks like him on the left side down in the gravel. The Dutch national road champion, as you mentioned, he is unfortunately seen more than his fair share of crashes.
Yeah, this is nothing for him.
Yeah, when he took out that fence after being taken out by a car in the Tour de France in 2011, that's when everybody said, dude, you are one heck of a gladiator. With over 30 stitches in his legs, he continued on in that race and held the King of the Mountains jersey for several days in the process in the Tour de France that year.
The peloton today in pursuit of a 5-man breakaway, just like they were yesterday, of non-threatening general classification riders. Their largest margin, over 6 minutes at 1 point, but the peloton very comfortable about the time gap right now, with just over 60K left to go. 5:20 is the gap, and taking a look at what's at stake here in this 4th day of racing. And you've got that tough Cat 3 climb that I think might catch some people by surprise, but still a ways to go from the finish once they get there.
Yeah, so it tops out about 35 kilometers from the finish, Steve, but we already talked about how steep it is, 29% maximum. Last year, we saw a huge battle between Rodriguez and Contador on that climb, but it finished at the top. Well, this year, at the top, they get into some wind, some exposure to the wind, so it's going to thin out the peloton, and then guys are going to look for opportunities to try and take advantage and springboard up the road from there to the finish line.
Just saw the names of the riders in this move today, just over 3 hours in, and that margin hovering right around 5.5 minutes, so no concern for the peloton on another bright and sunny day in northwestern Spain around the Galician coast, and a day like yesterday, where wind could also feature prominently. Could be more of a crosswind today, whereas they were twisting and turning yesterday, going into a headwind, crosswind, tailwind at various points, but could see more of a crosswind as today's stage develops.
And you can't control 20 guys that are, 10 seconds, 20 seconds and stuff like that behind you, so you might have to let something go, but yeah, we'll ride the front for sure.
So stage 8 is the next summit finish day. Do you think that more or less you guys should be able to control things with the help of the sprinters teams until that next summit finish day, and then that's your next real test personally?
Yeah, you saw from the team time trial, we have a fantastic team, one of the strongest teams here in the race in terms of just all around. I mean, we have Popo, Gregory, and Fabian that can control everything on the flats, and then of course Heimar's riding really good, Kieselowski's riding good, Boucher can climb and ride on the front in between any of the stages until the finish, and the whole group of guys is solid. So we came with a really good team, and everybody's fit and motivated. So, and of course we just took all the stress off the team right now, so we just ride and we keep the jersey for as long as we can and have a good time doing it.
So that was Horner yesterday. This is Horner today, riding in the bunch. And Gogo, what kind of a sense do you get about how long he truly believes he can hold this jersey right now?
I think Chris thinks he and his team, he has a lot of confidence in the Radio Shack squad that's assembled there in Spain around him for just defending this race lead. So I think he feels that he can hold it for sure into stage 8, which is our next big summit finish in the Vuelta. And at that point, it's going to come down to just sort of reassessing, and you get there and you have to see how you feel. And he's the type of guy who will not give it up. He said that right at the beginning. You got the as long as you can.
How long do you think he's going to hold on to it?
You know, I think at this point it's pretty tough to tell what that next summit finish on stage 8 is going to do, because it's longer than the summit finishes we've had so far. It's so early in the race, and so we really haven't seen the gloves truly come off, and also the potential for the fatigue to start to set in to these guys. But I think Chris has a good shot of making it through that next summit finish, and if he does that with that encouragement, he may be in that jersey for a really long time.
53 kilometers left to go. For the first time coming down under 4 minutes to our 5-man breakaway, which went away a dozen kilometers into today's stage, and the peloton rolling along through some undulating roads in northwestern Spain and headed towards that Category 3 climb that will summit with just under 35 kilometers left to go on the stage. It is a climb where Joaquin Rodriguez actually won stage 12 of the 2012 Vuelta a Espana, finished on the top of that climb, so he'll know it well. But today it comes well out from the finish and just serves as a launch pad perhaps for some breakaways, for some potential attacks, depending on what the situation is in the race when they get there.
And you can see the peloton now, Steve, at 340 behind the group of leaders. So the gap actually has started really dropping fairly precipitously. And it looks like, in fact, they are trying to race for the potential stage win from the peloton, with teams like Omega Pharma, Quickstep, Gianni Mearsman, as well as Orica Green Edge's Michael Matthews.
Well, that final uphill will be interesting. 3.5% in the final 2 kilometers. A tough left-hand turn at 200 meters to go. Doesn't sound like a lot, but positioning and power will both be important in trying to pull out the stage win on a sunny stage 4 at the Vuelta a Espana. How do top pro teams allocate their resources and their riders between competing events such as the Vuelta, the USA Pro Challenge that just finished up in Colorado? That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. Very good. Well, first of all, there are 28 World Tour events on the calendar. They start in Australia in January. They end in Beijing in October. All the biggest teams are required to send a squad to each of those 28 events. And then you have all these other things that their sponsors want, like the USA Pro Challenge. If you're an American team, it's not a World Tour event, but you have to field a team there, because if you're an American team like Garmin Sharp or Radio Shack, you want to be in that race. So basically, they have to put it all into the hopper, take that with the riders' interests as well as illnesses and injuries and various other things, and they have to do the best they can to allocate the resources, to hit all the best marks they can amongst all the competing events that they're needed at. And so it sometimes really stretches the riders and the staff quite thin.
One more question.
Oh, bonus question, huh?
And it's from the group ride. Gogo, why do you need such big headphones? Well, I can answer that. You should see the size of Gogo's ears. It takes these massive Bose-looking headphones to cover those ears of Gogo's.
This is actually all the better to hear you with, Steve, as otherwise I would not be able to hear you or the producer. Yeah.
So, loading you up with 2 questions today.
That's a big day. I want to retain veto power on any question.
No. You don't have editorial control.
Oh, come on.
I have final cut on this one. But please tweet the questions to @BeachyGogo throughout the Vuelta, and he will do his best to answer any and all as we move along over these next 3 weeks. And the riders moving along at a pretty good clip here with 46 kilometers left to go to the finish of stage 4 in Fisterra. So the Category 3 climb coming up. They went through an intermediate sprint earlier today. There's also another intermediate sprint coming up at 41 kilometers left to go. But that's all we really have left in terms of things to look for on the road. 1 sprint, 1 climb, and then the finish in Fisterra. And the breakaway still defining the day. And you won't find a better postcard than that. Water couldn't be any bluer, sand couldn't be any whiter, framed by the hills of northwestern Spain, the Galician coast. Folks still on holiday over in Spain this time of year in late August. One of the reasons they moved the Vuelta from so far deep in September to starting in the month of August, so more folks could come out and take it in.
I think it's been a good move for them personally, because it also really gave the riders a chance to focus more on the Vuelta with their seasons being so incredibly long. If you bump that Vuelta up a little bit, it helps.
So much time for everything to come back together. Even if a team doesn't play it right and they make a mistake, they have time to recover. So there's no reason for anybody to really panic in the situation. Indeed,
and when I spoke with Neil Stevens earlier today, he's one of the directors for the Orica team, and Michael Matthews is very well suited for the uphill finish today. He just has to get over this climb of the Mirador de Ezaro. So Michael Matthews, director Stevens, he's not really sure if Matthews is going to make it over that climb. He thinks he's not. And he's just going to wait and see if he's close enough that he can get back on, or if they go to plan B, which would be Simon Gerrans. But Gerrans was in a crash yesterday, and he's kind of banged up.
Now riders grouping together at the front here, with the gap coming down close to 1 minute now. And 2 kilometers away from the top of the climb for our leaders. So it's going to really get steep here, leading up to the summit at 34.4K left.
And Steve, this is an incredibly short climb, but as we've mentioned, it's incredibly steep. So the gap being at just a minute 1 right now, it's very possible that that breakaway group will get absorbed with the antics from the peloton. Expect the peloton to go big on this climb. I don't think there's going to be any games with letting the breakaway dangle at this point. They're either going to get caught on the climb with the battle behind, or they're barely going to hang on.
Front of the race, Rasmussen, Vanender, Ede, Weiss, and Vikinen. They've been out front since the 12-kilometer mark into the stage. Now down to just over 35 left, and their gap is under a minute. Will it come cascading down even more on this climb? It's the last significant road feature between them and the finish of today's stage 4.
And this is one of the most harsh climbs, and there it is. You get an idea of just how steep it is, with Ede leading the group of 5 off the front. But I think their time is numbered right now.
Vikinen at the back.
Yeah, Rasmussen already coming off. Yeah, so is Vikinen, the Finnish national road champion in that special jersey.
Now at the front, Nicolas Ede, the 25-year-old French rider for Cofidis in the red, still looking pretty strong with Weiss on his wheel for BMC.
He's been with his Cofidis squad for 3 years, and trying to make his mark here today. But looking back, they know that the general classification battle is going to come charging behind.
All right. Chris Horner is in a red jersey on the left-hand side of the road. He's got his teammates at the front of this peloton. Johnny Hogerland, Vakon Soleil, they are up there as well. Saw Saxo Bank. And look how much it's stretched out behind them on this very steep climb. Almost 3 switchbacks with riders going through at this point, with the road touching 15% in some spots. Horner's in the red jersey, middle of the screen, left-hand side of the road right now, but near the front. Alejandro Valverde in a green jersey on the right-hand side of the road. And remember, these 2 kilometers leading up to the top average 13%. One part where it gets up over 20. We've already seen it hit 15.
Yeah, indeed. And right now, those guys all just kind of looking at each other, kind of what you would expect, because it's far from the finish line at the top of this climb. So those general classification men having a good look at each other. We may see somebody else really put a dig in and try and spring free that's a little bit further down, that the general classification guys look at and say, you know what, I'm hurting too much to follow that. I don't need to follow that. I'm going to let it go.
This is the front of the peloton. Winner is still there, right near the front.
So far, it's just attrition, just guys coming off the back of the field, Steve. And a day, maybe he's thinking he still has a shot to stay over the lead of the field, over the top of the climb.
A day, Weiss, and Vanendare are the three riders here. A day for Cofidis, Weiss for BMC, and Vanendare for Lotto Belisol. They have dropped 2 from the original 5-man breakaway.
Weiss had his birthday yesterday. Turned 28 years old, so maybe he's just getting a little day-late celebration here.
Now Vanendare struggling.
Oh, he just cracked. And that's what happens on these really steep climbs like this. You really can't get into a rhythm. You just struggle the whole way up, and they're barely moving, really. And when you crack huge, and now it's getting even steeper.
No accelerations from the general classification contenders back here in the field yet, as we're over 20% now. Movistar, Radio Shack, Omega, and FDJ, the teams out front. This is the attrition at the back of the field.
It's so hard to tell, Steve, when you look at the guys at the front, how hard they're going. But you look back here, and you can see the damage that's being done. And they've only been on this climb for just over a kilometer. Weiss now just coming unglued.
He's barely pedaling. And look at the bike going back and forth.
He can barely keep the bike moving.
That's Vikinen.
These kind of climbs, literally, you can barely get your feet over the top, and there's the peloton coming upon Rasmussen and Vikinen.
2 members of the original 5-man breakaway picked up by the front of the main field now. %. Almost standing still. Some of these guys just having all kinds of difficulty turning the pedals over, and look at this. Wow.
It's completely insane. Guys not making it, causing the log jam, and now other guys off their bikes. 28% now.
They're barely moving. Off their bikes. Almost standing still at 28% of a slope.
It's literally a walking pace. Vanendare now coming back.
And a Vaca Soleil rider going forward from the field as Vanendare goes back for Lotto Belisol. That's Nicolas Aday at the front here for Cofidis.
It looks like it may be Fletcher for Vaca Soleil. More of a classic specialist than a climber.
Aday, the last man from the breakaway. He's at the front of the stage right now, still coming towards the top of the climb.
And he's getting very close to the top at this point, Steve.
So Weiss a little ways behind him in second place on the road. And then it's the Vaca Soleil rider now in third. Still not up to the top.
So far, quite a bit of selection on the climb from the breakaway, but the field content to watch now Edvald Boassenhagen go off the front of the field.
He could be a guy who could win this stage.
Absolutely.
Edvald Boassenhagen, the Norwegian.
And he's coming back from that scapula break at the Tour de France where he really lost a lot of training. And when I spoke with his director just yesterday, I said, you know, how much more time does he need to get good? And he says he's getting better every day.
Well, watch for him later in the stage. It's a good finish for him. Just off the front of the field at the moment. So Day has almost 40 seconds on this peloton. It's starting to thin. Overall leader Chris Horner is still there near the front. This is our overall leader Day for Cofidis, who has shed the other 4 who were at one time with him in the breakaway.
It's Kreuziger on the right, out of the saddle. Horner in the middle in the red, and Boassenhagen on the left for Sky. Nibali is just back there in the green, or excuse me, the blue jersey. Nicholas Roach out of the saddle in the green jersey is the points classification leader. Sergio Henao on the right side. Hopefully he's getting his nutrition today.
Joaquim Rodriguez is also up there for Katusha in the red and white.
And Sergio Henao is a really punchy climber. And nice to see that he is actually feeling good today after really struggling the second day, which was the first summit finish, not eating enough food.
Daniel Moreno was also there in the polka dot jersey as the King of the Mountains leader. And other riders losing contact at the back. It is such a struggle. Tyler Farah was the rider for Garmin there a moment ago, who was trying to hang on. And now over the top of the climb, this is Nicholas Day on the descent after the 34.4K mark where they hit the summit. And it looks like the peloton will be next through.
Yeah, they're bringing back Fletcher. Roach is making another move.
Nicholas Roach in the green jersey of the points competition leads the group over the summit.
Going for mountain points, it looks like there is all he's doing. Just sitting up as he leads that classification as well as the sprint classification.
And Day with 38 seconds on that field over the top of the climb now, but still a long way to go to the finish.
A very long way at this point. A bit of wind exposure up here at the top, and as they get closer to the coast again, they'll get even more wind exposure. Going to be very tough for him to stay away. Vikinen there coming back, the big Finnish blue plus on his back from the breakaway through the field and out the back.
So the climb really didn't do much to the general classification riders. They all stayed close with one another near the front of the peloton, and that's where they all are right now after cresting the summit of the climb. So it didn't really do any damage to the heavy favorites. And no one really made an acceleration knowing that it wasn't the finish of the stage like it was for stage 12 last year.
Yeah, it's what they end up doing. The general classification men look at each other. Maybe you get some other guys that take a big risk and try and go from far out and get a stage win. But at this point, it's just damage control for the general classification men, watching their competitors.
And now everyone chasing just this one man, Nicholas Day of Cofidis, with 33.5 kilometers left to go. He has a 38-second lead as they head towards the Finnish town of Finisterre. But the main field certainly thinned out now, a much smaller group. We'll see if other riders regain contact on the descent. And plenty of time to do so, provided they are not totally shattered by that climb, which hit pitches of 28% at its steepest. The GC favorites together, 38 seconds behind our leader. It's Taruka of Caja Rural who attacked from the field. But not a lot of separation here at the moment.
Well, Day could use a little help right now. He's trying to tell the motorcycle, move out of the way so I can see behind me and get a visual.
There's Taruka there for the Caja Rural team, attacking on the descent of that Cat 3 climb. Used to ride for the Euskaltel squad.
He's an attacking rider for sure, and it looks like he is potentially going to make his way up there to Day. And honestly, Day needs some help. He will not probably mind having another rider come across.
Now they'll emerge from the trees as they head back towards the coast. The Finnish town of Finisterre actually was considered the end of the known world among the religious pilgrims at one time. It was said to be the westernmost point of continental Europe. But since they've been able to advance in mapping technology, they now know that there's a town called Cabo da Roca in Portugal that's about 16 kilometers further west, and that's actually the westernmost point of Europe. But the Pilgrims, they didn't know it. They were walking for days on end.
Yeah, but do they call the other town the end of the known world?
I don't think so. Omega Pharma Quick-Step trying to make it the end of the stage for a lot of other riders and set up Gianni Mearsman for a potential stage win, but these riders at the back of the group right now, so that's not a good sign. And that was Mearsman there, number 164, with some teammates just coming back to the group, so certainly not a good sign.
Yeah, but it's not a terrible sign, because at least he's making it back up there. They knew that that climb was going to be a little bit rough on anybody who had a shot at sprinting, and his director Rick Van Sleka said, you know, Johnny's feeling really good. He had a strong team time trial in the opening day, and he just said that he thinks Gianni really has a good shot at winning this stage.
Coming back to the group now with whatever sting that took out of his legs, how much do you think that might impact him in the finish, which is also slightly uphill?
Yeah, I think Mearsman, when he smells the finish line, I think he's going to be good. And unfortunately, this is Sammy Sanchez, and it looks like he's pulling over. The Olympic champion from 2008.
Going back to the team car, as Day now finally has company in Amat Chiruka, who's made it up to him.
Vale.
28 seconds with 28K to go for these two riders at the front of stage 4.
Well, two guys have a much better shot at making this work than one.
So, still some downhill to go before it flattens out. Small bumps and then a little uphill to the finish.
That's Sammy Sanchez there with his shoe off and having the mechanic do a little adjustment, probably to the cleat position. They have a little bit of rotation there they can play with.
I think he just had a rock in his shoe, and he wanted the director to take it out.
Yeah, 4 guys now getting away from the front of the field. Belkin man leading the charge.
Movistar, Katusha, and BMC there. And a group of 5 right here.
And these are the guys that are looking for the opportunities. They're looking for the general classification men to shut each other down, and this crosswind to create opportunities to jump away and just sneak away for a stage win.
Now the gap now at only 10 seconds, but it is really scattered behind these two right now. It's not just the field that's in pursuit, these small groups coming forward as the pace picks up.
And this is today. It was the partial selection on the climb, but then the crosswind and rolling into the finish up and down, where guys may take advantage of the small roads and the wind.
Jose Harada is the rider from Movistar, and the dark colors there with the green helmet going to the front.
And Angel Vicioso on the back there for Katusha. Right in the middle of that group was the Belkin rider, was Luis Leon Sanchez. There's another guy who has a very good finishing kick on a slight uphill.
Warner's pretty far down in the middle of that group right now.
Looks like he's on the left side of the road there. Kind of buried a little bit. And now we're going to have a couple of groups come together off the front and make it 6. Now these guys may have a shot.
They got to all work together. That's always the key. Some of the major teams represented in the move: Movistar, Katusha, BMC. The field in the distance behind them. Still not a huge gap, but if they start to really crank it, we'll see how much leash they get.
Well, and Steve, with the crosswinds and with the somewhat narrow roads, a A lot of these guys back in the peloton are not getting the draft, so they're not just getting sucked along. So a lot of guys are suffering and using energy. And that breakaway group, everybody's going to be riding together and sheltering their compatriots in the break.
So Valverde is up there in the white jersey. He's fourth from the front. Chris Horner, who has two teammates at the front, is much further back. He's in the middle of this group. Don't even see him at this point. He's so far buried in the middle of the peloton. 19 seconds from the stretched out field to our now small group at the front with just under 26K left. Earbuds, never hurt, never fall out, never stop. 24 kilometers left to go. The margin still at 19 seconds. So that six-man group that has just formed from the peloton is not really gaining much of an advantage over the field right now. They haven't been able to expand on the lead.
So far, Radio Shack just keeping them in check with two men at the front of the field. Radio Shack doesn't have to catch that group, but look at Jaroslav Popovic just ripping it right now. 72 kilometers an hour, well over 40 miles an hour. He looks back and says, oh, whoops, I gapped off the rest of the peloton. I actually want to be pulling them behind me.
Gives him a chance to take a sip, though. Catcher's breath. Single file. As the speed is high here. And once they went over the top of the climb, there was a regrouping of sorts on the descent for riders who had been dropped, and then this group got away.
And every time we see that front group, we're seeing a lot of Luis Leon Sanchez on the front because he's the highest placed man in the general classification, and all things being equal, he's the fastest sprinter in that group as well. So they're not going to give him quite as much help as he would like. If they can get him to do a lot of work, maybe one of these other guys could beat him in the sprint if they stay away. Look at that, 85K an hour.
That's always the challenge for a breakaway like this. You need everybody on the same page and doing their fair share of work to stay away, but you're not always going to get that because guys know that if they take a pull and they're not the fastest sprinter, they're basically just dragging other guys to the line with them who could beat them for the stage win, so they don't want to help.
That's right, and so the way it all works out is you have to pick your shots. 85K an hour. Just a moment ago, 53 miles an hour on just a small descent.
It's always just the calculus of how much are you willing to risk losing. Because you know if you don't work, there's a chance you're going to get caught by the breakaway and you have no shot to win. But if you do your fair share and you know you're not the fastest sprinter, you may not win, but your chances are still better against a smaller group than they are against the field. So to risk losing by doing the work, more often than not, would be the better play.
Well, and it often comes down to, Steve, the play of, and if I have a really fast guy behind me and I drag this breakaway up the road and get fourth, they're not going to be happy. If I have no fast teammate behind me, then I got to throw everything into the success of this break, and, you know, hopefully I'll get on the podium.
Yeah, the overall team ambitions certainly play a role in what's going on in the field behind with those teammates. So a lot of complicating factors on whether a rider will work or not in a breakaway.
A lot of complicating factors, and we've already discussed during this Vuelta that a lot of guys are moving around to different teams, and some of those announcements have been made. Some guys are still in negotiations. So there are other complicating factors that can create, well, let's just say some unusual racing once in a while this late in the year, things you wouldn't expect.
And they're not going anywhere right now. The gap is right at 17 seconds. It's been up to 20, hovering around 19. So they're not adding to their margin right now with 20K still left to go. And remember the uphill at the finish. They will turn left at 5 kilometers to go, and then the final 2K will average 3.5%. Left-hand turn at 200 meters before the line. So kind of a long, slow drag up to the finish today in Finisterre.
And today, the man on the back is the only man who survived from the early break of 5 over the climb, the brutally steep climb of the Mirador de Ezaro. but the other 4 have come up to him, and so
Horner's
that's
back
what you
at the
want
front here. Horner's back behind his teammates at the front of this field.
And now he's got more than 2 guys on the front as well. They have to be really careful right now, Steve. They cannot completely blow themselves out because they have to control Valverde at the end of this race in particular, because Valverde is not very far down in the GC, and he's got that great finishing kick.
24 seconds behind Horner as the day started. And Horner right now with 4 teammates in front of him, 1 behind. And Alejandro Valverde 4 wheels behind Horner at the moment at the front of the field. And the gap coming down to the breakaway, just 12 seconds with under 19 kilometers now left to go on the day. Xabi Zondio is the rider for Sky, number 199 here at the back. Now we rotate towards the front. Cannondale taking up their position at the front of the group. Espana second. Sky is there. Radio Shack has disappeared back into the group a little bit now. Coming up on the final 3K.
It looks like Sky does have some designs on this stage with Boassenhagen. As he's about 10 riders back, he's got 1 man in front of him to finalize that lead out.
This is Cape Finisterre. And the riders coming up towards the finish. About to go back uphill. It averages 3.5% in the final 2 kilometers. Now the Astana team of the former race leaders, Vincenzo Nibali and Yanni Brajkovic, the team with the most riders up at the front right now.
And Steve, they're just about to start that uphill drag to the line. It's not steep, but it just takes a little bit of the edge off, and there they're starting to gain some altitude. You got to be careful. You got to wait a little bit longer in these uphill sprints.
Now people are looking around, waiting to see who's going to attack. You know somebody's going to try to make a move, and look at the spectator sitting in the gutter there trying to get out of the way.
That's not a good place to be if you're trying to get a photograph, I can tell you that much.
Argos coming towards the front now in those white jerseys. Astana in the turquoise. Katusha up there. Vacan Soleil as well. No Chris Horner in the frame at the moment in the red jersey. Danny Moreno is there in the polka dot jersey for Katusha.
And it's just sort of a grind here for the guys, but they do have a tailwind.
Been battling a crosswind most of the day, and now a tailwind uphill, averaging 3.5%. Astana grouped at the front.
Well, Brajkovic just pulling off now. Paulo Tirolongo coming to the front to keep that pace high for Nibali, so Nibali doesn't get swarmed.
Now Danny Moreno sitting third wheel in the polka dot jersey after 4.5 hours. Looks like Wout Poels, maybe Westra as well there for Vacan Soleil riding near the front. Caja Rural rider trying to make his way up. BMC is not too far away. Cannondale still has a rider. And Movistar with a man about 4 or 5 wheels back.
Very tricky finale here to control for these guys with this uphill. Guys, they tend to run out of a little bit of gas in the lead out, and then you get swarmed from behind and everybody loses control.
Long drag in the final 2K up to the finish. There's Horner in the red jersey, right-hand side of the screen in the middle of the pack.
Right about there.
Kilometer and a half to go. Tirolongo at the very front. A few Sky Riders are there. Sergio Henao is one of them.
Boassenhagen, I see him on the right side of our screen, but he's still pretty far back, but there's a lot of time to still move up.
Gianni Meersman is there for Omega Pharma Quick-Step. It looks like on the left-hand side of the road. Nicholas Roach is there in the green points jersey, about 5 wheels back, it looks like.
Juan Antonio Flecha now making a charge.
He's going to the front. Our first attack on the final climb, just outside of 1K from the finish.
Flecha, the aggressor in other stages, back on the attack here today.
The first Argentinian to ever win a stage at the Tour de France. Launched a move yesterday. He's on the attack again today at the end of stage number 4. And that is Jose Herrada for Movistar in the dark blue with Danny Moreno of Katusha right behind him.
Blassenhagen still up there toward the front, 6 wheels back, biding his time for Sky in the black and blue.
Now they're looking around now, waiting to see who's going to lead the chase.
That's what happens. Now Moreno opening it up.
Moreno second to Fletcher, who's trying to hang on, but he won't do it. Moreno comes up to him. Danny Moreno in the polka dot jersey, the teammate of Joaquin Rodriguez, blows by Fletcher.
Moreno absolutely on fire. I don't think they have any time to catch him. This man has got a stage win in mind.
What an acceleration by Danny Moreno.
And that's Cancellara leading the charge.
Trying to reel him back in at the corner with 200 meters to go, but Danny Moreno has a little bit of a gap. Can he hang on? Daniel Moreno coming up. Final 50 meters. Cancellara trying to drag it back. Danny Moreno, wearing that King of the Mountains jersey, is going to hang on for the stage win in the 4th day of the Vuelta.
Nice charge there by Cancellara as well. Order coming across safely ensconced here. No big worries for him. A great finish there by both Cancellara and Moreno.
Moreno gets the stage win. Horner keeps the race lead after 4 days of the Spanish Grand Tour.
And Joaquin Rodriguez there giving the hugs to his teammate, Danny Moreno, the winner of stage number 4.
It didn't look like he wanted to lead it out, but then once he did, Daniel Moreno just blew away the rest of the field. They eventually started to reel him in closer to the line with Fabian Cancellara in second place, but the man in the polka dot jersey had enough left to hang on and win his second ever Vuelta stage as he wins stage 4 here in 2013 after capturing a stage a couple of years ago in 2011 as well.
And Steve, he's a multi-talented rider, 5th overall in this race last year. Earlier this year won the Flesh Wallone Classic. He's got a lot of different talents. This time the timing was perfect and Cancellara couldn't get him.
A surprising lead change, even though Horner and Nibali finished in a big bunch yesterday at the end of stage 4. The Italian is now back out front by 3 seconds on the American as we move in to day number 5. But Horner unfazed by the developments.
Chris, for once I think it is literally true to say that losing the red jersey is the end of the world today.
Is the end of the world?
That's where we are.
I don't know about the end of the world. For me personally, it's not a bad thing to lose a jersey. We're talking a few seconds, and so it's actually better for me now. No, I don't have to do any more interviews after this interview with you until we get to the mountains, and then in the mountains I either climb good and take the jersey back, or I fight for place on the general classification. But in general, for the sponsor, it's a terrible thing to lose a jersey because it's fantastic for them to see the red jersey every day. But for me personally, it's almost better to go without the jersey.
This is the talk of a man who is serious about winning this Vuelta a España.
Yeah, I have good legs. They're really, really good legs. And so if the team takes care of me the way they can, then I'm sure I'll have a fantastic Vuelta.
Beautiful. Thank you very much.
The ruling for the red jersey caught some people by surprise, including the man who took back the red jersey, Vincenzo Nibali, who didn't even know that he had the race lead once again. He was on his way back to the team hotel. The race organizers had to get a hold of him, call him back to the podium so he could participate in the ceremony as the race leader. Not one really for the general classification riders. We could see a field sprint.
I think we're finally going to see the closest thing to a real field sprint here today. A little bit of a downhill in the final kilometer. No big obstacles in the way. I think this one should come down to a big bunch kick.
Just 2 Category 3 climbs and 2 intermediate sprints in the 174-kilometer stage altogether that heads southeast today from the Galician coast into the Castilla y León region of northern Spain. Another sunny, warm one on the Iberian Peninsula today, and you are looking live at the main field. There is a breakaway up the road, and it's gotten the largest gap we've seen so far in the first several days of racing. At one point, it was 10.5 minutes ahead of this main peloton here. And as far as what's at stake, you have the mountain points, of course. First really true sprint stage of the race. And the red jersey could be up for grabs. Time gap still relatively small at the top of the standings, so with time bonuses for winning the stage, we could possibly see it change hands. But on balance, you gotta like Nibali's chances of hanging on to it at this point with likely sprinter stages over the next few days.
Indeed, I think that it would be a pretty big surprise to see Nibali lose the jersey. It's not as tricky a finish as it was yesterday, with the last 2.5 kilometers going uphill. Not steep, but enough to create a little bit of separation there, which caused that jersey to change shoulders.
Now, some aren't totally convinced that it's going to come down to a sprint. And that's because even though it's just those two Cat 3 climbs out on the profile, the road isn't flat on the run-in to the finish. It's undulating. There are some turns, and it's that unpredictability that the organizers have built into a stage just like today that makes it up in the air, that just leaves that X factor dangling out there. Sometimes in a Grand Tour you have a stage where it's flat and you know it's going to come down to a field sprint. Today it's a likely sprint, but you don't know for sure.
That's right, and there are three primary teams that don't want anything to stay away today. That would be Garmin Sharp with the American Tyler Farah, Quick Step with Johnny Mearsman, and of course you don't want to forget Orica Green Edge that has Michael Matthews. Those are probably the three marquee sprinters in the race.
Had a 5-man breakaway each of the last several days. This is the signature move here today with 65 kilometers left to go. The one name that popped up on the screen that you might remember is Nicolas Adet, the 25-year-old Frenchman for the Cofidis team. He's been in the breakaway the last 3 days and certainly was the most aggressive rider from the breakaway yesterday. He was in 3 separate moves throughout the stage. Tony Martin of the Omega Pharma Quick Step team, the German, back in the field here. But as far as that breakaway, as you might expect, nobody really threatening the general classification. Well down in the overall stand.
In fact, Nicolas Adet, 20 minutes back, is the highest man in that breakaway group on the general classification.
Now the overall jerseys right now, Danny Moreno wearing green. He's leading the points competition after his win on stage 4 yesterday. Nicholas Roach, winner of stage 2 in the polka dot jersey, leading the King of the Mountains. And of course Vincenzo Nibali back as the overall race leader for the second time, wearing the red jersey today. As we dip inside of 65 kilometers left to go to the finish. They just went through the first of the 2 intermediate sprint points on the day, and here is Nicolas Adet. Well, he rode so hard yesterday in the first breakaway. Once that came apart, he was on his own. Then other riders came forward from the peloton. He joined them. That disintegrated. He was still out front by himself all the way until late in the stage, but still has the legs to be out there once again on stage 5 here today.
Yeah, he's got to be feeling pretty darn worked over after the big day he had yesterday. But some guys, you'll see them day after day. They just get in that habit and they just keep going for.
Now the field right now content to let that breakaway hang out there. Very settled for the day right now, and we are underway with our the Vuelta here on Universal Sports. Coming up here on Universal Sports at the end of September in the heart country in Florence. Some gorgeous scenery, and as we see some rain for the first time coming down on the peloton here in stage 5, something to note about the World Championships is a lot of different that it's a good course for them. Not the true sprinters, but there are a lot of stage racers, there are a lot of climbers, a lot of the marquee names in the sport, both on the women's and the men's side, who really like the course in Florence.
It's typical of a road race at the World Championships to have a circuit that has some climbing and just throws quite a bit of unpredictability at the riders. They want to make it a type of race that allows a lot of different riders a chance to win. They're always very to control.
So our leaders now on the lower slopes of this Category 3 climb, the Alto de Padronello. Not a particularly difficult climb, an average of 2.5%, so it's not going to make a huge selection. It does get steeper towards the top, but most of the sprinters should be able to get over without any problem. Still a long way to go to the finish once they get to the summit, but for the first time we're starting to see raindrops falling on the peloton here, with Garmin Sharp leading the way for Tyler Farah.
Johan van Sumeren back to the front. He's been up there for a bit later in this race, doing some big turns on the front. 20 minutes down in the general classification, he sits, but that's not what he's here for. He's at the Vuelta to ride in the service of Tyler Farah on these sprint days, to bring back those breakaway groups and get his sprinter in a position to win.
An intriguing dynamic, because we've seen Garmin Sharp most of the way riding at the front to control the gap to the breakaway. When you have a stage that you feel is going to come down to a field sprint, and you have a few different sprinters who have a victory in mind, how do you get different sprinters' teams to share the load? How do you determine which team is going to do the riding at the front? Because so far it's been all Garmin Sharp.
Well, there are two things that come into play: bluffing and showing your hand, and making, talking with other teams. And so sometimes it's just the first team that goes to the front and says we want it, then the other teams sit back and say, okay, they've shown the interest and we're going to let them work all the way to the end. A lot of times what will happen is, before you put your team on the front like Garmin Sharp has done, you'll get with the other sprinters teams and you'll say, hey guys, Omega Pharma Quickstep, you've got Johnny Mearsman. Orica Green Edge, you've got Michael Matthews. Why don't we each throw two guys in up here and bring this break back together?
Well, so far it's been largely Garmin Sharp. Orica does have some men up there who've been lending a hand.
Yeah, but we have not seen a lot of the Omega Pharma Quickstep on the front today, and they've done some work in the other days, but so far have come up a little bit short.
Now this main field not yet on the climb. Our 5 leaders have started the Category 3 climb, but not this group.
Yeah, that's what's always so interesting about these races, when you look at the riders climbing and they're not yet on, quote, the climb that the race is calling the climb. And there's just a lot of this stuff out there. It's
working for Tyler Farah of the Garmin Sharp team, hoping to get his 4th ever stage win at the Vuelta. He's won stages in all 3 Grand Tours, 2 at the Giro, 1 at the Tour de France. But it's been a tough couple of years for him. And it seems like this year he's just missed out at some of the big races. 2nd, 3rd. He's been in good position, but just hasn't been the fastest guy at the line. And a win in a Grand Tour near the end of the year, I'm certain would be a boost to his confidence, and probably something he could use.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually spoke with Matt Wilson, one of the directors for Orica Green Edge, as the KOM here. Looks like Nicholas Aday, no problem. And most aggressive rider from yesterday as well. That's why he's got a red number. But Matt Wilson, the director for Orica Green Edge, the team of Michael Matthews, maybe the fastest guy in the race, maybe not. We'll find out a little later today. I asked him who he thought the major competitors were if there were a sprint today, and the first guy he said was Tyler Farah. He said Tyler's been looking pretty good the last half of the season, and he thinks he's the man to beat today.
Working our way through the field up towards the front. Casual pace in the peloton. Doesn't it always seem, though, that anytime we have a stage where the profile says, all right, could be a field sprint, but there are some features and things out there on the road that may not let it come down to that. When we have those scenarios, it seems like more often than not, we don't get the field sprint. We do find some kind of a surprise, whether it's this 90-degree corner that comes inside the final kilometer, whether it's those undulating roads towards the finish. It seems as though we always have something that is somewhat of a surprise that keeps it from becoming a field sprint.
Yeah, it very often does happen that way. I totally agree. And there are a couple of decent-sized bumps right in the final 10K of the race today. So in the final 6 miles. So it is certainly possible that the sprint trains will get disrupted, or the sprinters will get flushed back a little bit in the peloton and not be able to make their way back up to the front. But I do think we're going to have a big bunch finish today.
Do you think it changes the dynamic at all that we don't have some other top sprinters in this race, like a Mark Cavendish or a Marcel Kittel, guys like that who are right now the fastest riders in the sport and whose teams are so dedicated to them in terms of a lead out? Do you think that has an impact on whether or not a stage like today comes down to a sprint?
I don't think it really does. I mean, look at Van Sumeren on the front in the rain. Look at his face. Yeah, it may be pretty easy sitting in the field, but he's putting in a massive amount of work up on the front. And now we got a man back here with a wheel problem. It looks like he's maybe asking for an entire bike. I don't think it's going to make a big difference on a day like today.
So it is a brand new bike for Dominique Nares of the BMC team.
Well, that's pretty interesting, because Nares was the man that was 22nd yesterday, and he was the guy that was 1.01 seconds behind who was 21st, and that's what caused the gap.
As the field goes over the summit of the Category 3 climb, a little more than 3 minutes behind our 5-rider breakaway. And that's one of the things that is a little unsettling about the way they determined that time in the 2 groups with Nibali and Horner yesterday. The 2 groups came across the line by pure luck, by happenstance. You had the guys at the back of the Nibali group who just, by luck, happened to be side by side instead of in a row. If one of those guys would have just trailed off or stopped pedaling 2 pedal strokes earlier, there wouldn't have been that gap, and there wouldn't have been 2 groups. Everybody at that point was coasting to the finish line, and by happenstance, it just happened to be that guys were side by side instead of wheel to wheel, and that is what put Nibali back in the red jersey.
Yeah, and that is, it's amazing that little difference could make such a big difference for the red jersey. But literally 0.01 seconds, that's not much time. I mean, if one guy had been a foot further back instead of all being side by side in that first group, it would all have the same time.
Everybody over the top of the climb now. And the gap under 3 minutes with 26 kilometers left to go, but still some rolling roads out there as they head southeast towards the center of Spain here today on Stage 5. Well, keep this in mind. The final 10 kilometers constantly up and down. They'll hit a stretch of 1.5K that averages over 4%. That comes with right around 6 kilometers to go to the finish. Should have a tailwind at that point. And then a 90-degree right-hand corner with 600 meters to go to the line as well. So some features there near the end that could change the course of this stage. Intermediate sprint coming in just about 2 kilometers. A lot of the general classification riders and teams just sitting back and letting the sprinters do the work at this point. Next big GC battles expected to come this weekend.
I'd be real curious to see if we get the Argos train lined up at the front at any point here in the next handful of kilometers with Warren Barguil, their Frenchman, who is a pretty fast sprinter, young guy, and he's really in this Vuelta as part of his development. The Argos team bringing a bunch of young guys to this year's Vuelta.
And headed towards Sanabria. The Lago de Sanabria, the big natural lake in this part of Spain. One of the biggest lakes in the country, but not there yet. Still with some business to finish off, and that is bringing back that breakaway. But Orica Green Edge very intent now. Just about all their riders at the front of the peloton to try and bring back these 5 as they hit that intermediate sprint point. And Arnaud Courtier, the 24-year-old Frenchman, first through for the FDJ squad.
Arnaud breaking his collarbone in January in the second day of the Tour Down Under, and that didn't really start his season off on a great foot.
Now, a lot of times when you get injured early in the season, you're playing catch-up the rest of the year because you don't want to miss a lot of training or a lot of races, so you sometimes rush back and you're never fully healthy.
Yeah, it certainly can really make a mess of the first part of your year. Quite often what we do see, Steve, is guys are actually able to recover from a really early season injury like in January, like he did, and come in so fresh mentally and physically late in the season that they can pop off some great results. But some guys just never really get it back on track.
Under a minute now from this field to our breakaway. Now, we say it so often. The teams that do the bulk of the work out on the road throughout the day to bring the break back many times miss out on a stage win because of that at the end. You've seen Garmin Sharp out there. You've seen Orica Green Edge. 2 teams most prominently doing the heavy lifting to bring back this breakaway, which is down to just 51 seconds up the road now. Will it cost them? Will other teams play off their work, exploit it, and use it to their advantage to get a stage win? As a Cofidis rider is getting some help back here. Adrien Petit, Frenchman, in the cars as he works his way back to the field with 11K left.
Steve, the chase and the lead out are this incredible dance of timing and strength. And if you get up there too soon, you can burn your guys out, and you don't have the freshness for the really high speeds on the run-in. If you get up there too late, well, if some other team takes control of it, they may be going so fast that you cannot physically get your team organized and haul them to the front of the field. And so there's all sorts of problems there. And if you get up there too soon and you don't have the speed, then you get swarmed either way. So it's about timing, and it's not just the same every day. It's different every course. It depends on the other team's goals and everything else.
So the Frenchmen get the top honors in the sprint a moment ago. Standings making it official. All right, coming up on the final 10 kilometers, and again, very up and down terrain to deal with.
Steve, I do believe that Michael Matthews is the man to beat today. Got a couple of wins in the Tour of Utah, and when I spoke with his director, Matt Wilson, as the stage was just getting rolling this morning, you know, he was pretty confident that the team was going to be good. And I've seen Matthews there riding very poised. He's a very young guy, but he's got great speed, and a former champion of the world as an under-23 rider. He's really good at the slight uphill sprints. But yesterday he just didn't quite get it because 2 guys had popped off the front, Cancellara and Moreno. He led in the rest of the group, though.
Oh, now here's Courtier, the Frenchman, really accelerating now. The main field about a kilometer behind these breakaway riders with 10K left to go. And we finally hit that point where one rider in the move said, enough is enough. I don't want to get caught. I'm going out on my own. This is the 24-year-old who has launched a bid here to go clear of the others.
Yeah, taking one of those bumps in the road and using it as a springboard. You can see just how tired the rest of that group was, exploding and splintering into groups. Jurgen van der Walle, the 36-year-old veteran for Lotto Belisol, trying to mark him, but so far it's not happening.
Now this young Frenchman missing almost 3 months because of his early season injury. Now trying to come back late in the year in a solo move here, leaving his 4 breakaway companions behind with just inside of 10 kilometers left to go to the finish of stage 5.
That leaves Simon Gerrans on the front now for Orica Green Edge. As you can see, another of his teammates just peeling off after a big effort. And they still got a ways to go. And they don't have that many guys left on that Orica train.
Second rider now on the road is Lotto Belisol's Jurgen van der Walle from the breakaway. A pretty healthy gap between the two here at the front of the stage. Peloton inside of a minute back. Back on Soleil rider just off the front, about to be picked up. Movistar also coming to the front in those dark blue colors with the green helmets. Just going inside the 9K banner for our leader from FDJ. Remember, the road still rolling up and down the rest of the way. No categorized climbs, but not much flat either. And sometimes that can be almost worse at the end of a stage like this. They will hit a stretch of 1.5 kilometers of road with right around 6K to go to the finish. That averages over 4%.
Yeah, it's a nice little bump, and then there's another one after that. So it's by no means flat. You're absolutely right, Steve. Makes it very tough on a solo rider because he has to drive down hard on the pedals on these descents where the guys in the peloton that are sitting in are coasting. And then he has to keep on the power on the climb, and that makes it very tough.
Just over 50 seconds behind at the 9K banner. It's not like it's an individual time trial on flat roads where you just bury yourself and try to stay aerodynamic the whole way through. You have to deal with the undulations in the terrain. You have to absorb it and try to power through.
He's doing a fantastic job right now, but it's the uphills that I think are really going to hurt him.
Yeah, he's about to get to this stretch here that's averaging over 4%. And they are flying behind. Orica Green Edge once again controlling the head of the peloton. Back on Soleil and Movistar just in behind. Other riders from the breakaway no doubt getting scooped up shortly. This is the only man left at the very front. Jurgen van der Walle in the background there, trying to hang on. But what was once a 5-man breakaway for most of the stage has come apart under the pressure of this attack by Arnaud Courtier, the 24-year-old Frenchman for FDJ. The other riders from the move dropping off. And the peloton picking them up on the road. 7K remaining, a 45-second difference.
Well, with van der Walle being so close behind, and there goes Nicolas Ade being picked up from the breakaway, the man in red for Cofidis. But honestly, with van der Walle so close behind Courtier, at this point, he's probably a little bit disappointed they weren't together the last handful of kilometers, trading pace.
Yeah, they've been just a few seconds apart, but you're stronger together than you are apart.
Indeed, you get that rest when the other guy's on the front. And he just continues to persist. He's making van der Walle ride all the way up to his back wheel.
And the field taking more time back. It's almost half a minute now with 6.5K left. Road not doing the breakaway any favors at this point either. So van der Walle has gotten on to the back of the Frenchman. And now what can they do together here? And now the situation is that it might be tough for van der Walle to take some pulls because he had to work so hard to get back onto the wheel of the FDJ rider too.
Yeah, both guys in the wind, so they're both flogging themselves, and then they get together. And Courtier doing his best to keep pulling there for a while, and now Van de Walle comes to the front. So they've done a great job to hang out there, Steve, but watch this peloton as they approach the left-hander or the roundabout here. And now picking up another man from the breakaway.
Piedra. Caja rider in the green goes backwards, and peloton scooting forwards. Just about 20 seconds behind, so they can just about see them up the road.
Indeed, on the longer stretches, they'll certainly see him, and on the uphills as well when the speed is lower. Also back in the peloton, keep your eyes out for Van de Walle's teammates, Lotto Belisol, because they have Greg Henderson, who's a very good lead-out man for Andre Greipel, but he's a good sprinter in his own right as well. And they don't have to do any work right now because they have Van de Walle off the front. So Lotto Belisol can just sit back, relax, and ride the train and see if they can take the lead in the final couple of kilometers.
Coming back with 5.5K left. These two losing their advantage. Last two from a 5-man breakaway.
And this is one of those bumps that are so incredibly painful when you've been off the front all day long and you just can't keep the intensity up anymore.
And now Omega Pharma Quick-Step with the light blue on the shoulders for the first time, really bringing some riders to the front to ride for Gianni Meersman.
Yeah, Tony Martin just about to hit the front. And you know, let's look back at some of the things Tony Martin has done for Mark Cavendish over the years, both on this team and the HTC High Road squad. He was a great lead-out man, not in the final kilometer, but up until that point, because he's got such a big engine. He can get on the front and drill it so fast that nobody else can attack.
Final 5K of stage number 5. 2 leaders with a dwindling advantage. The field just seconds behind. Still some up. A 90-degree corner inside the final kilometer. And Omega Pharma Quick-Step taking control at the head of the peloton.
It's Tony Martin as he's up there, 70K per hour, between 40 and 45 miles an hour for the chase right now, Steve. And the reason why, when you asked me earlier today what chances I give the break, and I said, a 1/10 of 1%, is just this. They're still out there with 4K to go. There's a chance, if everything went just right for them, they could win, but it's highly unlikely.
There's a slight uphill between 3K and 1K left, and then slightly downhill from there to the finish. But that 90-degree corner coming with 600 meters to go to the line. And just about to bring them back once and for all. Portier and Van de Walle. They know it's up. So Garvin Sharp, Orica Green Edge, and Omega Pharma Quick-Step, the 3 teams doing most of the work today at the front of the peloton. And it's Omega Pharma Quick-Step, the team that's at the front when they finally bring back the residue of what was once a 5-man breakaway for most of the stage, and now it's all come back. This is the front of the race with over 3K left.
I think residue is the perfect word because those guys probably feel like residue of their former selves, the way they started the day and all the work they did until they just got caught.
So Gogo, does it stay this way all the way to the finish, or are you looking for some surprises maybe from the field before we get there?
I'm not. I just am not. Tony Martin on the front is going to keep it fast. He's got a couple of teammates behind him there for Gianni Meersman, so they have strength in numbers. There's a bunch of Orica guys up there as well. See the Cannondale men up there as well. Just one of those in the green. That may be Guillaume Bavon, the Canadian sprinter on that team. Riqueze for Lampre in the pink would be their sprinter.
All right, this is that uphill that goes for about 2 kilometers. And then once they hit the 1K to go banner and the red kite, it'll go downhill slightly all the way to the finish. And that's why they're spread out along the road here, because they're going uphill. The breakaway has been brought back. And nobody going off the front right now, even though we don't see one team in firm control at this point.
It's faster, I think, than it looks. And there's the attack.
Euskaltel.
Good luck, buddy, but I applaud the effort, and they're giving him a shot at it. No quick reaction.
Well, it's up to the sprinters teams. The other squads, the teams of the GC riders, they're not going to lend a hand. If the sprinters want it to come down to a bunch finish, they're going to have to work together to bring him back. This Euskaltel team disbanding at the end of the year, so looking for some final moments of glory. This is the team of Sammy Sanchez, who lost time earlier in the race, so they're already on the back foot. So Pablo Urtasun in the orange and black going forward. Argo Shimano, the team in the white, finally organizing things with 5 riders at the front with inside of 2K left. They have Nicholas Arndt, Warren Barguil, 2 riders who could factor in the sprint. Reinhard van Rensburg as well. Urtasun, a small gap, but it's going to be tough to hold in the final kilometer and a half.
Urtasun started off the season really strong, Steve. Way back in April, winning the stage 1 of the Vuelta Castilla y León. Finished 4th overall there after being in the jersey for a day. 2nd in Classica Primavera, also in April, but he is going to come back under the impetus of Argo Shimano. I just noticed also Philippe Gilbert. He's on the left side of the screen, out of the saddle. Maybe he's going to give it a shot.
Oh, he is. Gilbert is launching an attack with just over 1 kilometer left to go. Desperate to finally get a win in the rainbow jersey of world champion.
He picked up 2 stage wins at last year's Vuelta, and they were the first wins of his career, or of the year for him, I should say, before winning the Worlds. And he's back in a very similar place this year.
So inside of 1 kilometer left to go, the road will start to go back downhill, and almost 90 degrees is the corner right there, with about 600 meters to the finish line. And Gilbert has been caught and passed. Argo Shimano now at the front after 4.5 hours. Vaca Soleil is there, Omega Pharma Quick-Step and Orica Green Edge, as well as Team Sky with Edvald Boassenhagen as they set it up for the field sprint. Argo Shimano with 2 guys at the front.
Third wheel is Michael Matthews. Look at him on the right side of the screen.
Matthews now up along the barrier. He's engaged in the sprint. Gianni Meersman coming up from behind him. It's going to be Matthews. It's going to be Meersman. Also Ricchese of Lampre there battling, but it is Michael Matthews of Orica Green Edge who gets the win in the field sprint on stage 5.
Well, I have to say, Matthews was very patient. He showed a lot of seasoning there as a pro, because his team, Orica Green Edge, was out a lead-out man. He freelanced off of the Argos lead-out, timed his sprint, and had the legs to make it happen.
They finally got the field sprint they wanted, and Michael Matthews got the victory he was looking for. It's the first ever Grand Tour stage win for the 22-year-old Australian on the 5th day of his first ever Grand Tour appearance, as he is the Earbuds Performance of the Day, winning the field sprint.
He comes from 3 wheels back, doesn't have teammates there at the end, jumps into that final left-hand bend, Johnny Meersman on his wheel, and for a while there, it looked like it was going to be pretty close, with Ricchese coming up on one side and Meersman on the other, but he holds him off pretty handily and gets that first Grand Tour stage win in his first participation.
Ricchese and Meersman bumping shoulders just behind Matthews, who is still, nonetheless, the performance of the day, brought to you by Earbuds. Never hurt, never fall out, never stop.
And his team did a great job to get him in position there at the end, but unfortunately they didn't have anybody still left to lead him out, so he worked it off the Argos lead out, and it all came out good for him.
This has been my goal since the start of the year, to come to the Vuelta in good form, and yeah, everything leading up to this point has just been progression to get me to this level, and the team's been awesome through my progression this year, and yeah, I couldn't have got this win without them. They rode all day. They put all their effort into the final, and yeah, I was just really happy to finish it off for the team.
The lesson is clear. Yesterday, you're third, and sometimes job has success.
Yeah, yesterday didn't quite fold out the way we wanted it to, but yeah, that's racing. And yeah, today we just wanted to try again, and yeah, we had more of a chance today than yesterday. So yeah, we put all our eggs in the basket for today, and yeah, came out with the win.
I suppose you'll dedicate this win to your fellow that fell yesterday.
Yeah, he's has a broken collarbone at the moment, so yeah, I wish him a fast recovery, and yeah, this win's for him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vincenzo Nibali is still the leader by 3 seconds over Chris Horner, 21 over Alejandro Valverde, so there were no gaps and there are no changes in the overall standings. Glad to have you with us as they roll towards the town of Caceres today in western Spain. Nibali, the leader, wearing red for the third time after surrendering it for 1 day to American Chris Horner, but now safely at the top of the standings. He expects to hold that jersey for at least the next few days, if not longer. He has a 3-second lead over Horner, 21 seconds on the former Vuelta winner Alejandro Valverde. 17 riders altogether are within 1 minute of Nibali's lead. And this is live with our lone leader. Only one man in the breakaway today, Tony Martin of the Omega Pharma Quick Step team. His lead 3.5 minutes on this main field as we dip under 50 kilometers left to go on what is a mostly flat stage. There was some elevation earlier in the day, but this may be the easiest stage so far in the first 6 days. No categorized climbs, 2 intermediate sprints that they've already gone through. This is one of those textbook days for the sprinters.
Indeed it is, and when you have only one man off the front, even though it's the 2-time reigning world time trial champion Tony Martin, it's very easy to control one guy. A team puts a few men on the front, they can bring him back quite easily. I feel a little sorry for Tony Martin out there all by himself, I have to say.
Several different teams riding at the front of the main field right now with that 3.5 minute margin that's coming down. And what's at stake, you ask, for this stage number 6? Well, 33 points up for grabs in the green jersey competition, which is pretty tight at the top. And it is a stage for the sprinters who don't want to miss out, given the fact that this is more or less a Vuelta that's for the climbers, with a dozen uphill finishes, very mountainous, very difficult. So the sprinters, without a lot of opportunities to begin with, don't want to miss out when you have a golden chance like they have today.
Indeed, most of the sprinters have been scared to come to the Vuelta this year because it's such a brutal climbing race. So for those sprinters that did decide to go to Spain, well, days like today, these are the days they have to capitalize on.
Yesterday was our first field sprint, won by Michael Matthews, the Aussie for the Orica Green Edge team. Clearly proved that he was the fastest man in the bunch, and given what we saw transpire, no reason to bet against him today, is there?
Not really, and there are a couple things that can happen if you have a guy who won yesterday like Matthews did, and one of them is that the other teams can say, well, all right, we have proven there's a little bit of a sprint hierarchy, so no other teams go on the front to help chase. But by the same token, it looks like the Argos guys have decided they're going to ride on the front a little bit to chase Tony Martin.
The other side of that argument for Orica Green Edge is they say, well, you know what? The pressure's off us. We've already won a stage, so if you guys want to win a stage, you ride at the front. We're going to sit back.
Yeah, it's kind of the Simon Gerrans approach this morning before the race, as he said, okay, we got our stage win, so now the pressure is off us. But I honestly think that that's kind of a bluffing technique. I think that Orica is the team that probably wants to try and rack up more stage wins with Matthews. I think they feel that they have the speed in the 22-year-old Australian, and so they've got to bluff their way into that so they don't have to do too much work on every one of these days that's a potential sprint finish day, or else they'll run out of guys even earlier than they did yesterday. I mean, he had to freelance that sprint at the end of the day because his guys got burned out.
And it's an interesting psychology because other teams have to read into that bluffing game and decide if they're bluffing or if they are not. And you have to believe that it is a little bit of a mind game because Orica Green Edge doesn't have a real GC rider, so they're betting everything on the sprints. And with only a few sprint stages, why would you just be satisfied for one? Why wouldn't you go for more? So those other teams have to be thinking, okay, Orica's going to be up there. They're going to try to get Matthews another one here today as well.
Yeah, and you thought poker was complicated. Try doing bike racing.
A lot of hands, a lot of poker faces to be played out there on the course. So with 46 kilometers left to go, the day pretty much settling in for the field that is just over 3 minutes behind a one-man world time trial champion, Tony Martin.
The 2013 Vuelta a Espana on
Tony Martin, whose lead is under a minute. As we are inside of 30 kilometers left to go to the finish in Caceres here on stage number 6.
There's that sticky bottle we were looking for just a minute ago.
Well, throughout the Vuelta a España, we are inviting you to tweet in your questions or comments for GoGo here. And the most recent one coming from Luke Danielson. What stage of this year's Vuelta do you think a rider will try to take ultimate control of the race in? Who do you think it will be as well that will try to grab the race by the throat? So, Gogo, what's it going to be?
Schlanger, I think that you're going to be going for it in stage 15 because there's 4 Category 1 climbs there, and it finishes on a Cat 1. But I think I'm going to wrestle it back from you on stage 20 on the Angleroo climb.
Is that your way of dodging which actual rider is going to try and do that?
I actually think that it's going to, you can't really wait. Nobody can have complete control of the race until stage 20. The Angleroo is one where it is so tough, and it's 3 weeks into the race that if a guy cracks, he could lose it. So I think we have to wait for that final mountain day. And Cycling Luke, maybe that's Cycling Luke right there. And I think that's the day that we have to wait for. And I think it's going to be Nibali, honestly.
The only thing I'll say to that is, so often we come into a Grand Tour and we talk about the last mountain stages and how it's all going to come down to that. But what ends up happening is we see earlier in the race who are the stronger riders, who are good in the mountains. And by that point, once you get to the final weekend, the general classification has already taken shape, and we don't see guys losing it. We don't see somebody falling apart and the jersey really changing hands. We see who's good early, and they tend to just maintain that throughout the rest of the race and not have that bad day where they lose the race on the final weekend.
Exactly. And that's why when you said yesterday you wanted people to stump me, there's no real answer to that question, because the way it works out, a rider sees the race unfold day after day, and they find a chance to seize the moment, and that's what ends up making the race. They don't look at the course and say, I'm going to win this race overall on this day. Last year at the Vuelta Stage 17 to Fuente Day, a medium mountain day, there's no way anybody would have thought that Alberto Contador would have seized the moment there, won the stage, and won the Vuelta. It was one of the easier mountain days. But that's the day where he made it happen. And that's why Cycling Luke 2000, he stumped me. There's no way to answer that.
See the difference, just about 14 kilometers left to go, and there they are right behind him. Argo Shimano in the white. A couple of different sprinters on that team, but riding for Ramon Sinkeldam today.
They kind of have a trifecta of potential sprinters on that squad, a young squad. They're just trying to mix it up and try it with different guys for a number of reasons. A, to give them a shot at a stage win. B, to just work on combinations of that lead out. It's so incredibly difficult to get your timing right, not have other guys bump into the middle of your train and get your guys separated. It's just a massive battle in a field sprint.
Just over 3.5 hours to cover this distance of 175 kilometers, down to just about the last 13 now. Coming into the outskirts of Caceres in western Spain here today. No trouble out on the road, no crashes, no technical turns like we've seen earlier this week.
And Steve, one guy who's been a little bit quiet in these sprints is Greg Henderson, the Kiwi on Lotto Belisol. And I was hoping to see him really mixing it up in some of these field sprints, especially yesterday. Maybe we'll see him today. Look how fast Tony Martin is still going, though, after being off the front for so incredibly long today.
Well, everybody's got a shot. Full pack together here as they come up on the back of Tony Martin. Wide road, so getting towards the front, moving into position shouldn't be all that difficult. No climbs.
But a lot more difficult than it looks, that's for sure.
No climbs to soften the legs today, so on balance, everyone should be feeling pretty decent. So the last dozen kilometers now coming up here in stage 6. Remember, the final 7K will see the road go up ever so slightly to a 2.5% grade. Final 4K offer up 6 pretty difficult turns, and then at 400 meters to go to the finish, there is a beyond 90-degree left-hand turn around a traffic circle that they will be seeing for the second time at that point. They'll also hit it going the other way with 3.5K to go. And remember, it's also slightly uphill in the last 2.5K before it flattens out near the finish, but that is very subtle.
Granted, he's the guy with the biggest bullseye on his back right now, as is his team, but they haven't done much work. And I think that he's the guy that's going to be propelled by the success from yesterday, and his teammates propelled by that as well.
Espana riding at the front in the red jersey, a few wheels back, overall leader Vincenzo Nibali. Saxo Bank, the team riding behind him in the yellow and dark blue. BMC with a few riders in the red black over on the left.
I just noticed Greg Henderson on the right, as if on cue for Lotto Belisol, their sprinter for this race.
Tony Martin doesn't look like he wants to give anything up here.
No, he really doesn't. Just dangling out there.
And riding in the most comfortable position possible at the moment.
Yeah, I usually try and spend at least half of every ride sitting on the top two.
Absolutely. He is still pumping along at 40 miles per hour as the field hits the 10K to go banner.
Yeah, he's picked up a handful of seconds.
Well, again, look how much they're spread across the road. We don't see one sprinter's team really coming to the front with all of their riders and setting a heavy tempo right now.
Yeah, it's that battle for position back there where nobody wants to put everybody on the front and commit. But look at Tony Martin's ribs. He's a big guy, but notice his ribs right here. I'll get that arrow out of the way. Next time you see him, you can see with every breath his ribs sticking out. He's a big dude, but he's mighty lean.
And now the field's starting to expand here. Stretching out a little bit more with just under 9 kilometers left to go. I tell you what, the field obviously still in good position to bring him back, but if there's one guy in the field that you don't want to give much leash to by playing any kind of games or waiting for other teams to do the work, it's Tony Martin. Because he could solo away before you know it. And again, we don't see one team up there really coming to the front right now. Lead at 17 seconds. It had come down to under 10. And teams kind of looking around, waiting to see who's going to come to the front. Nobody wants to really lead it out at this point.
Well, Steve, they are giving him just that little bit of rope to get further up the road, but there's just no way he's going to hang off the front. The guys are going to suck him up eventually when the battle really starts. You can see some of his teammates now coming up on the left side of the peloton.
They obviously want to get Gianni Meersman a sprint win if they can, but again, you don't want to go to the front while you still have your teammate out there. But you also don't want to wait too long and then be out of position or miss out on a chance to sprint.
Everybody's trying to save their energy for when they think they can hold it to the line so fast that no other team will come over the top of them. Yesterday, Garmin did a bunch of work early, then they were kind of blown out. Then Omega Pharma Quickstep came to the front. They did a bunch of work. They lost control. Argo Shimano finished it off. Actually, Orica Green Edge was in there as well. So no one team was able to hold it to the line. It's very tough to get the timing, and there's a lot of back and forth in those lead-out trains.
Now Movistar riding at the front.
Well, Steve,
7 kilometers left to go. And the road now starting to go up ever so slightly, 2.5%.
I'd love to see Tony Martin hang on into the final kilometer and really push everybody behind to scramble. But even for a man of Tony Martin's skills, it's going to be so incredibly tough to pull this off after being off the front all day by himself.
Chris Horner. The long day and the lonely day out front for Tony Martin is about to end with 5 kilometers left to go on stage 6. And we'll start to see some more technical corners coming up shortly as well.
What's amazing to me is how solid Tony Martin still looks. He really is not coming back on his own accord. It's just the fight for the field sprint that's bringing him back.
Cannondale with a rider at the very front, followed by Omega Pharma Quickstep, Vaca Soleil, Orica Green Edge among the teams near the front. Now that they know that Martin is back, let's see what kind of calculus develops there at the front. Who wants to take control? What will the dynamic be?
A bunch of men for Lampre up there as well in that pink jersey for Ricchese. Ricchese second in that sprint. Yesterday has not picked up a win yet this year, but he's been knocking on the door.
Well, it was at 3 seconds, and it looked like they were about to catch him, but it's kind of holding here. The gap, at least for the moment, is not getting any smaller.
It puts a big smile on my face, I have to say, to see Tony holding everybody off. Even though it's against all odds that he'll make it to the finish line, he may make it into the very final meters of this race.
So now here are these technical turns we talked about. Does that tilt the balance in his favor somewhat?
I think it helps him a little bit. Anytime he's out of their sight, and remember, he can take his perfect line through every single corner. But the guys at the front of the field, they also pretty much get their perfect line unless somebody comes inside of them at the last second and kind of upsets them. But good for Tony for hanging on. 8 seconds. He stretched it back out.
All right, Argo Shimano in the white now, riding at the front of the peloton. Just over 3 kilometers left to go.
He's starting to give me a little bit of hope, I have to say. It's not over till it's over.
Still 3K, a little more spread out here. Is one team going to really take control here? We have a Cofidis rider just going off the front by himself. Argo Shimano, it looked like, was trying to bring more riders to the front of the field. They have 4 riders in the white, but now chasing the Cofidis rider who just went over the top. Tony Martin is inside the final 3K. Again, it's slightly uphill at this point for Tony Martin.
Cofidis has Petit, who's a pretty good sprinter, but they have sprung one guy off the front now. Notice Tony, he's so exhausted at this point. On this little downhill, he coasts, he tucks for just a second, then he gets back on the power. And the Cofidis man almost sucked back up by the Argos train.
Any chance Tony Martin is going to hang on to this?
You know, I just can't imagine it happens. But the way he's riding, I'm starting to wonder.
So the Cofidis rider has been brought back. Now Argos with 4 riders at the front. Ramon Sinkeldam is their targeted sprinter for the day. 2 kilometers left to go for Tony Martin. Single file in the field behind. At one point, they had Martin back to just 3 seconds. They were right on his tail. And now he stretched it back out. At the 2K banner, it's 9 seconds.
Oh my. Oh my. You can also see Tyler Farah there in the blue for Garmin Sharp, right behind the lead-out train of the Argo Shimano guys in white.
There's a little disorganization at the front of this field with 1.5 kilometers to go.
Well, one of his guys just got to the front and just sort of moved over into the gutter and pinched some guys off.
They're not riding for Mearsman anymore.
No,
They're playing defense and riding for Tony Martin.
Indeed. Tony Martin has a legitimate shot at this, Steve. It's unbelievable.
He may hang on. No one team in control. His Omega Pharma Quick Step team playing defense for him with just over 1 kilometer left.
And indeed, it was Orica Green Edge going to the front for Michael Matthews. They see the clear and present danger, but they may have waited too long.
If there is one man you don't want to fool around with out front, it is the World Time Trial champion, Tony Martin. The only man in the breakaway all day long, and now a chance to hang on to get a solo win.
And total disorganization on the front right now. Rasmussen going to the front for a last dig for Tyler Farah as he knows this is almost over. Tony Martin may ride away with this.
Inside the final kilometer, there is that beyond 90-degree left-hand corner with 400 meters to go. Tony Martin still hanging on. At one point, his lead in the final kilometers was down under 5 seconds, and now here he is with a chance for the most improbable win. The World Time Trial champion, Tony Martin, the only man in the breakaway all day long, is hanging on to this advantage after almost 4 hours. Argo Shimano trying to close it down. Here comes the sprint behind him, but they waited too long. 200 meters to go. Now closing the gap here, but running out of road. Tony Martin desperately trying to hang on here. Radio Shack bringing a rider up. Is Tony Martin going to lose it right at the line? Oh, they come over the top. Saxo Bank gets the win.
It looked like Nicky Sorensen for Saxo Bank. Total chaos. I thought Martin was going to get it. Oh, that must have been a big bummer for the German. 110 miles off the front.
It looked like the special red and white jersey of Nicky Sorensen, who you certainly would not have predicted. It's Michael Morkov. Michael Morkov of Saxo Bank gets the win. Wow. Bobby and Cancellara on the left-hand side of the screen really engaged the sprint early.
Well, Cancellara went very long, and that's what made the difference for this sprint, as Morkov was sitting third wheel right behind Cancellara. Cancellara took a massive dig with Tony Martin still dangling off the front. Then Morkov comes up the right side and launches his sprint, which he has perfected on his track racing, which is where he comes from, and they go blowing by Tony Martin. And poor Martin.
He was looking over his shoulder in the final 50 meters and just could not hang on. Instead, Michael Morkov picks up his first ever Grand Tour stage win.
De esta etapa, Michal Morkov. Michal, congratulations. Can you explain this strange win, this strange final?
Sure, it's also strange for me. I have to be honest and say that I was never participating really in a bunch sprint like this before, and yeah, I tried because I'm the only one for the team who can sprint, and for the end I had a really good position. I got in the wheel of Cancellara, and he took a long sprint, and I felt already on 90% on the wheel of him, and I knew that I would have a last kick, and it was just precise enough.
I suppose the most difficult was to decide the moment, the time to make the jump.
Yeah, when I jumped, I was actually a little bit unsecure if I did it too early. I was really exciting to see the finish line, but this was a really fast sprint. I think we had some tailwind, and it was really quick to the finish, and we just passed Tony Martin on the line, so he did a big effort as well.
Your most important win. What do you feel?
Yeah, I feel amazing, and it felt fantastic to raise my arm with this national Danish jersey at the finish line of this stage. I'm unbelievably proud and happy and really lucky.
I repeat, congratulations.
Thank you very much.